Welcome to Aston Means Business, a podcast from Aston Business School. My name's Steve Dyson, and I'm a journalist who's interviewing some of the UK's top business academics here at Aston. This podcast has been going since October 2019, and there are now more than 30 previous episodes that you can listen to. You can find them all simply by Googling Aston Means Business. Today's episode is all about the challenges faced by women who decide to launch their own business in their late 40s, 50s, 60s, or even their 70s. We'll be discussing this subject with Dr. Isabella Moore, herself a businesswoman who's just completed her doctorate here at Aston Business School, focusing on what's termed later life entrepreneurs. Hello to you, Isabella.
Hello. Thank you for wanting to listen to my research.
Let's find out a bit more about you first, Isabella. What's your business background and what led you to be taking a DBA, a doctorate in business administration, that's focused on women who are becoming entrepreneurs in their older years?
Okay, well, I founded in the 80s a company that provides language services to industry. It's now a multi-million company with all sorts of high-tech solutions supporting exporters who need language services to promote their goods and services. I sold that I sold the company in about 2002 and then bought it back again, I must say, for a lot less than I sold it for, and now run it with my daughter Sophie, who is the managing director. I chair the board, and it's a family business. My son-in-law is technical director.
What's the business called?
It's called Comtec Translations, and we're based in Leamington Spa. So when I bought the business back again, I was about 60 and found myself again at that age an entrepreneur. And what struck me was that I remember the issues I had when I first started off in business in my 30s. And I realized that they're slightly different, some similar, but some very different issues I had to contend with at that age, co-running a business. So some of the issues I had, I was a grandmother, so I had some responsibility to support my daughter with the grandchildren. I had a mother who is now actually over 100, who was my responsibility. But above all, I think at that age, what I found, I think, was a sort of drop in confidence in myself, and the feeling that somehow society saw me as somebody that's done something, achieved something, but it's time to retire. So, and that was something, that was an identity that I had to struggle with. But and how I got to start this research was that I've always been interested in this intersection between policy and business. I was myself the first female president of Coventry and Warwickshire Chamber. I chaired the West Midlands Chambers of Commerce, and actually was the first female president of the British Chamber of Commerce. So I was able at sort of local, regional and national level to have that relationship with politicians and in some way lobby on issues that affected smaller business. And I was particularly interested in women's entrepreneurship. It seemed natural when I, again, as I said, found myself running a business in later life, that I sort of wanted to look at the issues that I was contending with. And it was a sort of chance conversation I had with Professor Mark Hart at Aston Business School, and talking about this, that he suggested that I start this research at Aston, and that's how I came to do it.
Fascinating stuff, Isabella. And I think actually I came across your name when I was industrial correspondent myself back at the Birmingham Mail in the mid
Yeah,
1990s.
yeah, that's
So,
right. Yeah.
although I don't think we've actually met before. And anyway, Isabella, what has your research discovered about why older women might want to set up a business?
Okay, well, I think first of all, I didn't like the term older and senior. The term I most dislike is senior entrepreneurship because,
Right.
in fact, it comes across as a very unnuanced term. First of all, when you look at entrepreneurship in later life, and that's what I like to call it, or later life entrepreneurship, there's a vast difference between somebody, say, of 50, 49, 50, thinking about setting up in business, and somebody, say, at the age, as you mentioned earlier, 60, 70. So it's not a homogeneous group. When I looked at research that had been undertaken to date, what I saw that it was very rarely looked at the gendered issues around that. It was always just senior entrepreneurship. So when I started the research, first of all, I interviewed both men and women. So it's about a 50-50 split. So I wanted to understand these gendered nuances. And also, I interviewed a group that were already in business, those that were just thinking about it, but also importantly, those that had never thought about it or would never think about setting up in business, because I really wanted to understand why. Because in the end, not everybody is going to be an entrepreneur. I also looked at the research from three perspectives. One is around the sort of societal attitudes and norms that impact the decision to set up in business in later life. I also looked at motivations. And then thirdly, I looked at how difficult or how easy is accruing the sort of resources you need to set up in business. And was that a sort of gendered issue? Were there differences for men in later life with women in later life setting up in business? Pivotal to everything are the societal norms and attitudes towards older individuals. Both genders perceive that people who retire are certainly not seen as potential entrepreneurs. That is a big issue. So they themselves felt that society looked at them slightly oddly. It was sort of regarded that if you were going to set up a business in later life, that was slightly deviant from what you were expected to do. They also felt that their skills and experience are undervalued, that, there's this sort of perception that once you've reached a certain age, really, you ought to be thinking about playing golf, looking after grandchildren, and really not what on earth would you be thinking about setting up in business. I mean, there are some positives. Society, for example, and they all agree that think that women manage money better than men. They also think that women are more willing to learn and they sort of retain their cognitive skills better than their male counterparts, which was interesting. But when it comes to the sort of issues and the societal barriers for women, first of all, they agreed that many business support organizations don't take women in later life who might be thinking to set up in business, they don't take them seriously. They felt that society assigns to them certain roles that it's very difficult to get out of. So I mentioned earlier the role of carer for both grandchildren, carer for elderly relatives. And it was interesting in my interviews that the men, they did not see care responsibilities as a big issue because it didn't affect them, basically.
Right.
And so, they didn't see this as a barrier, in contrast to to women. And I think as a result of that, society regards women in later life as not potential material for entrepreneurs, that it would cause too much of a conflict in their roles to even start thinking about it. Before they even start, they've got this sort of environment that they have to contend with. And then you would think, well, why on earth would they even want to set up in business when they're faced with such issues? More positively, they wanted at last to be able to live by their own values. And I remember one particular lady saying to me, I often disagreed with what my boss was saying and how he conducted himself, but I wasn't in the position to be able to oppose that. And I just want to live by my own values. There was a group of women that felt that at last they were in a position where they wanted to achieve something and be challenged in their life. And they saw perhaps setting up in business would give them that opportunity. But then going back to the more negative aspects of why, unsurprisingly, they faced ageism at work. They were often the ones that were first to go. And I think this is particularly relevant now, post-COVID, where we are seeing that it is, first of all, there are more redundancies among people over the age of 50, and particularly among women over the age of 50. And some of them actually were just dissatisfied with their jobs, the way they'd been pushed to one side, or they felt that they weren't progressing, and they just wanted a change. What we see is a mixture of motivation. It might be necessity that they really felt that they needed to supplement their retirement income. And remember, women are much more affected than men by reduced pensions. Many women, as a result of perhaps separation, divorce, employment, that they had to stop because of looking after children and then resume, their pensions aren't as high as their male counterparts. So they felt the need to supplement that income.
What other hurdles did they face?
They were very reluctant to approach financial institutions like banks for financing of their business. So and that is quite a barrier, because obviously that means that they are either relying on their own resources or perhaps going to family business networking was quite a challenge. And so many of them resort to other networks, family, friend networks where they feel more comfortable. And above all, scarcity of time. I think that is a resource that, interestingly, the men never found that was a barrier. But for the women, it was actually finding the time to actually find headspace to really sit down and think about, how am I going to take this idea forward?
What's a quick priority list of solutions?
Business support programs need to take into account, and I mentioned already some of the aspects of setting up in business in later life, which I hope this research will highlight. I think the media need to portray older women, and I'm not going to say older women, I'm going to say women in later life in a different way. Government policy needs to be refined around welfare, around pension, and make it as easy for them to set up in business rather than put sort of hurdles and barriers. And I think financial institutions, this is a potential group of important customers. And for example, now at the age of 70, banks, for example, will no longer give loans, no longer give mortgages, cancel travel insurance at the age of 70. Well, these are just little everyday examples, but banks should see this group of individuals as a powerful new group of customers and adapt their financing, their loans to suit them, I think.
Well, I think your research, your findings, and your solutions sound really useful and hopefully influential for the likes of banks, government, and policymakers as well. I now want us, Isabella, to listen to an entrepreneur who took part in your research to find out how she got on with setting up business in later life. Joining me online now is Merle Palmer. Merle's an entrepreneur who runs a business called Your Scots Past, and she's also Deputy Chief Executive of GrowBiz Scotland. Hello to you, Merle.
Hello, Steve.
First of all, Merle, tell us about your business, Your Scots Past.
Your Scots Past is a professional research service, and I research family history, also known as genealogy, and business and building history. I have a professional qualification and many years of expertise, and I provide the service to businesses throughout the world.
It's quite a skilled profession that you're in, Merle. I mean, not only is it genealogy, but it's also paleography, which is the study of ancient writing and inscriptions, and heraldic studies. I mean, you're quite a qualified person, aren't you?
Yes, I studied at Strathclyde University to get a professional diploma in this. There's lots of people involved in it, but I think to provide a professional service, you do need that breadth of qualification and understanding all the different elements that might make up a history of a family or a place or a building.
And I take it, Merle, that you're born and bred in Scotland.
Yes, I was born in Scotland. I moved to England for over 10 years, worked down there, and then moved back here in 2000.
When I was looking at your website, Merle, I was thinking to myself, first of all, this is quite a niche business. But then at the same time, the more I read through the different case studies you've been looking at, I thought there must be a huge market out there, both nationally and internationally, of people and businesses who know somewhere in their lives or in their past that they started in Scotland, but now they want to build the history or the family tree to show people where they've come from.
Yes, it's a huge market, particularly with the diaspora. So many people want to re-establish their roots back to Scotland. A lot of people will start doing some research themselves and then will come to me as a professional to help them when they've reached a brick wall, or perhaps to access material that's not available online. I've also done a number of projects with businesses, for example, a distillery where they were looking to relaunch a visitor centre and they were interested in finding out more about their founder. So it's a very diverse business, but with a huge audience.
I want to ask you, as you know, about your role as what's called a later life entrepreneur. When did you start Your Scots Past and how old were you then?
I started Your Scots Past in 2013 and I was 49.
And what had you been doing before that stage?
I had a very diverse career beforehand. I'd worked in customer service, office management for a number of large organisations. I moved back to Scotland and then worked for two smaller companies where I was involved in all aspects of the business, working partly as a bookkeeper and office manager, but the business I was in latterly, I was importing, exporting, buying currency, moving containers around the world. So it was a very different business.
Why did you decide to start off as an entrepreneur in what we might call later life?
It was as a result of redundancy. I just lost my father-in-law. A day later, I was very unexpectedly made redundant. And it was a fairly difficult, challenging time. And I decided that I really didn't want to work for anyone again. I wanted to be my own boss. So it was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, but it was also probably the push I needed to move into running my own business.
How did you find the experience of starting out in business, one as a woman, and two, in this later life stage?
It was challenging in many ways. I think the situation, because I'd been so unexpectedly made redundant, it really undermined my confidence. And I knew I wanted to do something that was very different to what I'd been doing. And I had a passion for genealogy. So the two came together. But to start a business from scratch in a very different industry was a challenge. I struggled initially to find any support. So I had the business skills, if you like, the practicalities of the bookkeeping and the administration side. And I undertook formal training, so that helped. But actually, a lot of the other elements that rely on confidence were lacking. And I don't think I realized that initially. So the challenges for me were recognizing my skills, but also after many years of representing a company, the biggest challenge was probably going out there and promoting myself.
And how did you overcome those struggles? What gave you the confidence to do that?
For me, the biggest difference came from finding a good mentor, someone who could really support me and push me, but also understand and help me to find the solutions, and finding the right support locally and starting to build a network were really important in helping me move forward.
And 8 years on, Merle, after starting your business, I take it you've got a nice little successful Your Scots past.
Yes, it's going really well. I've refined what I offer, and I recognize who my target customers are in a way that I didn't initially. I think lots of people, when they start in business, everyone's their customer, and you start to refine that process and understand where your skills lie and who you want to work with. And so I've got, yes, a really interesting range of customers at the moment, predominantly, I would say, from overseas. And it's going well, despite this last year when I've been fairly limited in what I've been able to do. I have a queue of customers waiting now for when we can get back to full business.
What else has this experience as a later life entrepreneur enabled you to do?
My role at GrowBiz has come through my initial setting up my own business. I approached GrowBiz to get some support and attended some of their networking events, and from there I was allocated the mentor I mentioned earlier. I then trained as a mentor and then joined the GrowBiz team, and I'm now Deputy CEO, something I could never have done from at the point I left paid employment. It would have been impossible, I think, for me to do this, but the whole journey through being a self-employed, being an entrepreneur, has led me and helped me build the confidence and the skills to take on this role.
And GrowBiz, just for listeners who might not know about them, just tell me just very briefly what they do.
GrowBiz is a charity, and we provide free business support to rural entrepreneurs throughout Scotland. And we do that through one-to-one support, events, networking events, mentoring program. And quite interestingly, around 65-70% of our clients are women. So it's a model of support that sits well with women entrepreneurs. And a significant number of those, I would say, are over 50 as well.
For other women out there, Merle, in so-called later life, who may well have great entrepreneurial ideas, but who fear they might be too old, or there's too much out there against them, what would your advice be to those women?
I think what it's really important to do is to find a good support network, and a network of peers that understand what you're going through. Having the right mentor can be critical, because they're someone who will help you find your own solutions, but are not necessarily invested in you in the way that family or friends are. And I think what's also really, really important is recognising your transferable skills. So a lot of people will come out of a paid employment or go back into something where they are familiar with it, it's what they've always done. And I think the key to being successful and sustaining a business is having a passion. And I don't think women always recognise the incredible skill range they have, particularly if they've been out of work for a period of time running a home. They've still developed lots of skills. So good network, a good mentor, and finding a way to recognise your skills.
And from what you've said, it sounds like you'd certainly encourage people to have that go, to feel that they can do it.
Absolutely. It brings a flexibility that you can't necessarily have in paid employment. And I think after this last year, that's going to be even more important. It's also rewarding to have a passion, to see that passion through, be supported. And also, I think as women, we're also very good at supporting other entrepreneurs, male and female. And sometimes women's skills are also in that element of providing peer support to others. So I think that a lot of women are risk averse, particularly with financial investments. But I would just really encourage people to give it a go.
Merle Palmer, owner of Your Scots Past and a successful later life entrepreneur, as well as being the Deputy Chief Executive of Grow Biz Scotland, many thanks for joining Aston Means Business today.
Thank you. My pleasure, Steve.
Hi again, Isabella. Are you still with me?
I am. That was really interesting to listen to Merle. Yeah.
It certainly was. What's your view on the experience Merle went through?
I picked up 3 motivations that she mentioned. One is that this process of being made redundant was so bruising for her that she felt that she didn't want to work for anybody else again. She had an interest and hobby which she saw could be, which was genealogy, which she saw could be developed into a potential business. She also mentioned later on that she wanted more flexibility. She found that she lacked the confidence. Now, that lack of confidence may have come from her experiences in paid employment or because of age. The other issue that I think she alluded to was the difficulty in finding support. It was interesting that the whole process of setting up in business, operating her own business, gave her the confidence and developed, again, a confidence in herself that led to her now doing these dual roles. It is so important to get the right sort of support. One of her biggest problems was promoting herself. She was probably very, very good at working for other people, and she knew, she's so typical. She had all this experience working over her working life in different companies. She was highly qualified, which many of the women that I interviewed were highly qualified, had gone for an additional qualification, I think, to increase that confidence. And yet the biggest challenge for her was to promote herself.
For any women out there listening, Isabella, especially if they are in later life and are considering whether they might want to launch a business but are worried that they are perhaps too old or don't have the ability, in short, what's your priority advice to those women?
Follow your passion. If you really believe that you're good at something, believe in yourself and the fact that you have a whole life full of skills and experience that you have accumulated, and you can use them and you can turn that with an interest into a business. And remember, it's never too late. And, if you don't do it, you might then get to the point in your life where you will regret it. And, what have you got to lose? It's worth a try.
Dr. Isabella Moore, many thanks for joining Aston Means Business today.
Thank you, and thank you very much for listening to me.
And thanks to everyone for listening to what is an original podcast series for Aston University. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can find earlier episodes by simply Googling Aston Means Business. Meanwhile, we'll be back soon with more interviews from some of the UK's top business academics here at Aston. Aston Means Business. Thanks for listening.